Today, I want to talk to you about how enablers and flying monkeys fuel abuse with the abused, actually. Narcissists don't work alone. They have to have enablers and flying monkeys to help them carry out their campaigns. This is extremely frustrating to us, those of us suffering the abuse. It seems that no one is on the side of us. So I want to talk about that today. I have recently had an experience of my own which sort of prompted this topic today. So, I'll explain to you what that was about. But first I want to read to you a case history of someone that I worked with. His name was Gary. And this is a case history about flying monkeys. It's actually from my book, and you can find it in the book under Flying Monkeys. But Gary, 39 years old, called me to help him with problems he was having with his ex-fiancée. A friend of his had suggested that his ex might have narcissistic personality disorder, and he wanted to know what I thought. Gary was kind of a late bloomer. He had been obese since childhood and had never had a romantic relationship before he met his ex. He had always gotten along with women and had many female friends. 3 years prior to meeting his future fiancée, Gary had undergone gastric bypass surgery. As he lost the weight, he began attracting attention from women who wanted to be more than friends. Gary hadn't been particularly attracted to Trish when she first came on to him, but she made him feel so loved and accepted that a romance quickly bloomed. After dating for 6 months, she convinced him to put a ring on her finger, and then she moved into the house he owned. Suddenly, everything changed. She hated the fact that he had female friends and gave him an ultimatum, her or them. Gary felt like he had no other option than to give up his friends, but it wasn't long before he began to regret that decision. For the next 3 months, his fiancée controlled everything he did and said Gary was miserable. He knew he couldn't go forward with the marriage they had started to plan. He tried to discuss postponing it, but she got angry and wouldn't talk to him for 2 days. Gary finally got up the nerve to tell her he didn't want to marry her and that she'd best pack her things and move out. But she refused to go. Gary had no other choice than to change the locks and put all her things on the porch. She was livid. She immediately called her family and friends and told them Gary had been physically abusing her. She rallied the sympathy of everyone she knew. From that point on, every time Gary answered his phone, someone on the other end was telling him what a horrible person he was for ruining his fiancée's life. People on Facebook were calling him a woman beater, and one day, while he was out, he ran into someone that actually threatened his life. He felt like he was being stalked and followed. Gary was upset that people were accusing him of doing things he would never think of doing. He didn't understand how he'd been the one who was abused, yet he was being labeled an abuser. I explained the concept of flying monkeys to Gary. He asked me if I thought his ex was a narcissist. I told him probably so, but that I would need to know more. And then we arranged some more counseling sessions. So we're first going to talk about flying monkeys. And Gary's story is a perfect example of what happens with flying monkeys. If you haven't heard the expression flying monkeys, and I'm sure you have, because if you've been listening to me and listening to other people who discuss this topic, you will have heard this expression. And when you hear it, it conjures up that scene from Wizard of Oz where the witch is in her room at the top of the castle with all these flying monkeys, and she says, "Go get Dorothy." And they just kind of fly out the window and go do her bidding without a thought. because she is in control of them. And they will do exactly what she says. The same holds true for the flying monkeys that are recruited by narcissists. These people are very vulnerable. They buy into the narcissist's lies, and then they kind of robotically do the dirty work for the narcissist. By getting others to harass his or her victims, the narcissist's hands stay clean, impeachable. Nothing can hurt them. Nothing can touch them, because they're not doing the abuse. And that's what flying monkeys, the purpose that flying monkeys serve, is that they do the abuse while the narcissist's hands stay clean. So who are these people? These people are sometimes very gullible, and the narcissist will tell these people things in confidence that he or she knows is going to anger them, like what happened with Gary, like you've abused, you've beat up your spouse or your girlfriend or your boyfriend, or you've caused all these problems and you're a horrible person, and they start to recruit people who they tell this story to that is not true. It is far from true. It is actually the opposite of the reality. But people get so up in arms over this. And they decide they're going after you. Because the narcissist is saying, oh, I'm so sick and so sad and so depressed and so lonely. And these people are going, oh, no, 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 it's not you. It's the other person. And they get so worked up that they go and they do these things. Now, sometimes these are people who are just gullible. And narcissists know that these people are going to take the information, circulate the gossip, spread rumors based on what they're being told. But sometimes they're just bullies. And sometimes they're looking for an excuse to hurt people and scold people and put people in their place. So this is what the flying monkey does. And when you experience the wrath of narcissistic abuse and the smear campaign that follows, be very careful what you say to anyone who may have contact with your abuser, because these people may not have your best interests at heart. They may have been your friends before, but they're not anymore, and you cannot count on anyone that you used to count on. As badly as you want validation and compassion for what you're going through and how much you want to redeem yourself in the eyes of these people, you cannot blindly trust anyone at this point. So this is what happens with flying monkeys. And it is crazy-making. It's maddening. Narcissists will do this with family. They'll do this with friends. They'll do this with coworkers. And all of a sudden it feels like the world is against you. I've even had clients who their spouses or the person that they were in a romantic relationship with were in the government. They were government officials. They were with the police department. These are people who had great connections. And so in the city that the abused lived in, there was no place to go because everyone, even the psychologists and psychiatrists, had been turned against this person. And so it's crazy. And all you can do when this happens is just to hold your head up high and go about your business, because eventually the narcissist will reveal who they are and people will stop doing what they're doing. In the meantime, it can be torturous. And if you find that it is so torturous that you can't bear it, then move away and start fresh. Because flying monkeys will make your life miserable. You won't be able to go to the grocery store. You won't be able to go to the pharmacy. You won't be able to drop your kids off at school or pick them up without somebody, staring at you, leering at you, saying things to you. It can get very oppressive. So if this is what you're experiencing, I do recommend that you either, if you can, just hold your head high and go about your business. Do not address any of these people. Do not defend yourself. And you can even make comments like, if people say something to you, you could say something like, you never know who you're really dealing with. Or, yeah, sometimes we get into things with people we shouldn't be with. Things like that. You can say comments like that without defending yourself, just sort of hints that make them think and make them understand that you are not the perpetrator and that you are innocent in this. So I had a really interesting couple of days, past days. I've been in no contact with my parents for probably 3 years now, give or take. I don't really know. And in that time, my life has been so very peaceful. I don't have pictures of them around. I don't listen to phone calls or anything from them. They don't even call anymore because they know I'm not going to listen or pick up the phone or whatever. So anyway, I haven't had any contact, and it's been wonderful. In the last few weeks, my parents have both gotten very ill. My father more than my mother. My mother has recovered. My father is still very sick. And so my sisters, who have been in contact with my parents, have been filling in my daughter and my son. They don't bother me with it, but they've been filling in my daughter and my son. And then, of course, I talk to my children and I get the information. I want to know what's going on. I just don't want to be involved in it. So it finally came down to a point where my father had this awakening. He's been an enabling parent for so many years, and I'm going to explain about that, how the enabling parent and other enablers work. But he's been an enabling parent for so many years that he has not seen the side of his 3 children. And all of a sudden he's laying in his hospital bed and he begins to see the light. And all of a sudden he realizes who he's been married to all these years. Now, they're married 70 years or more, something like that. And he begins to see that his wife has turned him against his children and has caused so many problems in the family. And he declares that he wants a relationship with his children. And he is going to have that, and she's not going to get in the way. My sisters get very excited by this because they're hearing something they've never heard. And it is so very healing, so very therapeutic. And my father is 96. He's not going to be around that much longer. So to be able to hear that before he dies is so very important to them. I was pulled in to this because they told my father why I had pulled away, why I was no contact, and he said he completely understood where I was coming from. This was such a change because for several months, maybe a year, I have felt his hands choking me around my throat. He's so angry at me for abandoning him and my mother. And now he's saying, I get it. I understand what Randy's going through. And so one of my siblings called me, and she said, I'm not putting any pressure on you. I know how you feel, but I want you to understand that Dad really wants a relationship with you and us. And he's willing to do anything for that. And I thought to myself, wow, okay. And she asked me, would I like to talk to him? And I said, you know what? Yes. Under these circumstances, yes, I would. So he was on his way. He had come home, and he was on his way back to the hospital. And so she was going to arrange it so that I could talk with him. So in the meantime, all this craziness starts happening because my mother is at home, and she's flipping out because she's losing control. My father tells her, this isn't about you. I'm sick. I need to go to the hospital. And she's telling him, you don't need to go. What are they going to do for you? He had sepsis. He had kidney failure. He had all these things, and she made him come home early. He checked himself out against the doctor's orders because she was putting so much pressure on him to come home. And when he came home, he really let her have it. He said, how dare you separate me from my daughters, and I'm sick, and you're not going to tell me what to do. This is not about you. He went back to the hospital, and in that time, my mother began to flip out. She was so vicious because she thought she was losing control. And when he got home, she made it so difficult for him that he called one of my sisters and said, my devotion is to my wife, not to you, not to my daughters. And if you want to have a relationship with me, it has to be with her too. So he did a complete, a complete switch. It was instant. So in the course of about 3 hours, my life went from peaceful to chaotic. I couldn't believe the craziness that happened in the course of 3 hours. It was beyond belief. I was a nervous wreck while all this was going on, and I was getting texts and everything about what was going on, and I'm thinking to myself, why did I open myself up to this? Why? It was so peaceful, and now I'm so confused and crazy. I don't want to know this. I don't want to be a part of it. And as it turned out, I didn't have to be a part of it because he made his decision, and he declared it's either the two of them or no relationship. Either we have a relationship with my father and a relationship with my mother, or we have no relationship with either. So that was his choice. That's okay with me, and I understand where he's coming from. He was experiencing tremendous cognitive dissonance, where you have two opposing thoughts at the same time, and you don't know how to deal with it because it makes you feel crazy and guilty, and you don't know what to do with it. So what you do is you default to the one that's easier. You default to the thought or the pressure that's more familiar, and you throw the other one away because in your head is nothing but scramble, craziness, confusion, and chaos. So you have to get rid of one of them. And this is what he did. So he made this choice, and it didn't surprise me. Knowing what I know, it didn't surprise me at all. I wasn't even that hopeful that I would have this relationship. So when I had it and lost it within the course of 3 hours, it really didn't hurt me at all. I was fine. The craziness did. It left me in kind of a state of depression for 2 days. That's what it did to me. That's what having this in my life did to me. And so the contrast was so apparent between the peaceful life I had and this 3 hours. So bizarre. So when I tell you that I understand what you're going through, I totally do. The thing is that narcissistic people cannot exist in a vacuum. They have to have hosts to feed off of, and they have to have worshipers. That's why they go to great lengths to keep people around them who supply them. And spouses are ideal sources of narcissistic supply because they're always accessible. By the time the children enter the picture, the family picture, the spouse has already built up their world entirely around the narcissistic parent, their partner. And children are set up to be abused before they even enter the world. Because the narcissist, the enabling parent, is the ultimate accomplice. The enabling parent provides his or her spouse with endless fodder while also enabling the spouse to take whatever he or she wants from the children. And even worse than that, the narcissist actions prevent them from ever being held accountable for their despicable behavior. Now, the enabling parent the job is to obey, please, and worship the narcissistic spouse. And I often hear from my clients that they have one narcissistic parent and the other parent was a good parent. The reason that it seems that way is because this parent was not actively abusing. But in a sense, they were abusing because their life depends on their partner. And so while it may look to the children like this parent is protecting them from the narcissistic parent, the enabling parent is entirely unable to do that because this parent cannot even protect his or herself from the narcissist. So this is a parent who will not go to bat for the children because when push comes to shove, they save their own ass. And that's really what this is about. The enabling spouse, the job is an impossible job of trying to keep the husband or wife happy. And whenever this spouse fails to do it, no matter how slight the offense, the enabling spouse becomes the target of the rage and devaluation of the narcissist. And so the enabling spouse, their job is to please and smooth things over and to make things okay because the rage and the pressure that they're under is so tremendous that they can't function in that environment. It is such a entangled and all-consuming relationship between the enabling parent and the narcissistic parent that it crowds the children out because they're so enmeshed in keeping their dysfunctional union intact. And the children are of little importance. So narcissists have very little power when they don't have enablers or flying monkeys. Because when they offend, if you call them on it, they have nobody else to go to bat for them. And what usually will happen is they'll get rageful, and they blow their cover. So if you have a covert narcissist like my mother is, all of a sudden she's going to blow her cover, and it's all going to be so obvious. And this is what happened while my father was in the hospital and she was in a nursing home recovering. She raged at everyone. So it wasn't only when my father got home that she raged at him, she raged at everyone. And then the home health care provider, she raged at her too. And she lied. And everything that we knew about her but could never really witness, all of a sudden it was so overt she couldn't control it anymore, and it all came out. Because she had nobody to enable her. And when that happens, it sounds like it's a bad thing. But if your abuser is a covert abuser, which they're very, very dangerous because you can't see what they're doing to you, and they cover it up really well. If your abuser is covert and they have nobody, no flying monkeys, no enablers to do their bidding for them, then they become obvious, and it becomes easier for you to recognize exactly what you're dealing with because it is all right there. Nothing is hidden. You see it all. And it helps you to come to an easier decision about what you want to do with that relationship because you're no longer doubting yourself. You're no longer saying to yourself, well, they're good sometimes, so maybe they're not all bad. Or, well, they say they love me. So, and it's my parent. Parents are supposed to love their children. That's just what they do. All these rationales really go out the window when this person becomes, when they reveal who they truly are. And so you're able to make an easier decision. And this is what happened in my family. I had already made my decision. My siblings, not so much. They still had hope. They still held out hope that there was going to be a relationship. It took this. It took my mother showing her true colors and my father rallying to her side for them to see that this was a hopeless situation. And I'm so sorry that that had to happen that way. But for some of us, we don't wake up until it is so in our face that we cannot look away. You know, I do this work. Every day of my life, I do this work. It is my expertise, and I know this disorder inside and out. So I was able to recognize and deal with it much faster than my siblings were. And I got a lot of crap for it, too. They did not like it. And over the course of the 3 years, I got a lot of pressure to come back to the family. And every time I got this pressure, I soul-searched. And I said to myself, okay, how does it feel How would it feel to pick up the phone and make that call to Mom and Dad? How would that feel? And it never felt right, so I didn't do it. No matter how much pressure was being put on me, I didn't do it. I knew who they were, and I knew I couldn't be a part of it and still have a functioning life. And so that's why it was so very interesting in those few hours that I saw the extreme contrast between peace and chaos. And I realized that was the chaos that I lived with for most of my life, every single day. And you know what the caregiver said to my sister? She said, "Your mother is horrible. In the 30 years that I have been taking care of people in home health care, I have never met anyone as horrible as her. If she had been my mother, I would have committed suicide." Wow. What a statement. But you see, she didn't see the covert person. She saw the overt person. And that makes it a lot easier to deal with. So if you have a parent that is enabling your narcissistic parent, they really cannot have a relationship with you in a healthy way. And it all has to be enmeshed. If they've divorced, that's a different story. If they're apart, that's a different story. But if they're living in the same house, it's impossible to do this without being sucked in constantly. And your parent may have or may still act in ways that seem as if they love and want to protect you from your abusive parent, but you have to understand that they are unequipped to do so. And you grow up with no one to advocate for you because they're so enmeshed in each other that there's really no room for you. And when push comes to shove, they're in each other's corner, not in yours. So as long as this marriage stays intact, children have no leverage against the abusive narcissistic parent. Nothing will change. The enabling parent will always facilitate the spouse's reign of terror against them. This is a really sad situation. When I tell you this story, I want you to understand that I'm telling you this not because I need to share it, but because I want you to hear my experience with this. I'm really okay with this. It's okay. It was actually very interesting to me to see what happened, to see the way this all played out. So I'm okay with it. I've been okay for a long time. But I do understand what you all go through. Because I've lived it and I continue to live it. And it's crazy. So I just wanted to share that with you as an example of what this looks like. And maybe you'll see it in your own situation. Maybe you'll see some of this in your own situation. And it can help you to gain some clarity on what you want to do, because it's very difficult when you have abusive parents to figure it out, because it's so up and down and all around that you never know what you're dealing with. And so it throws you off, and it makes it very difficult to make concrete decisions, to have boundaries. So hopefully this will help to wake you up and give you some insight. And that's why I did this today. So this actually was an extra show I threw in because I had a cancellation today, and I threw this show in so that I could share this information with you. But I thank you for listening. And may joy and serenity always be yours.